That says we are live.
Yes.
All right. Oz Du Soleil here with Rick Grantham and George Mount for an episode of Excel in the Wild. And we're going to talk about what it takes to be a good analyst, and more specifically, how do you interview for a good analyst? That is a puzzle that has been going on since the caveman days. So anyway, all right, we're going to talk about this. We're going to start by talking about what it takes to be a good analyst and then get into the interviewing. So everybody introduce yourself. George, who are you?
Hi, Rick and Oz. It's George at georgejmont.com. I blog regularly about Excel and more on the career development side of that. For example, I just put out a course a few weeks ago called Hired with Excel: The Essential Guide to Interviews. So I'm really trying to dig into this topic, and just going back to a few years ago when I graduated, I felt so unprepared with Excel and specifically, how to use that in the workplace, and just see a real demand for that. And like Oz talks a lot about, all the pain that people suffer through bad data. That's really, what is motivating me to put out these courses, and this kind of career-related big picture stuff when it comes to Excel, I find really important. So that's why I'm here.
All right, cool. All right, Rick.
Hey everyone, this is Rick, Rick Grantham over at Excel TV. So you might know me from Excel TV, but what you might not know is some of the background and what I'm planning on bringing to the table today. When I was about 24, 25 years old or so, I got my first job in a call center at Citibank. A few years later, learned Excel. And within 5 years, let's say by the time I was 29 or so, I was a VP at Citibank and had about 100 employees. Some of those analysts, a lot of them on the phone, but through that, moved through finance, et cetera, and a lot of other places. So I really had to get into what it meant to hire people, what to look for, particularly when you're running a staff that large, and with several layers of management sometimes. And then moved on over the next 10 or 15 years, worked for an HR outsourcing company, starting in finance, building salary arbitrage models. So what does it mean whenever you build a financial model and you need to move some people to India or to Canada? And you have to take into account, finance and all that sort of stuff. So $100 million type deals. And how do you hire those sort of people? How do you hire the sort of people not only in the call centers, but the people who are doing the number crunching and the pricing? What do you look for somebody who's going to do pricing for a living?
Wow.
One more thing, for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been working in consulting. So I'm the director at a business intelligence firm or director of a consulting firm in business intelligence. So I have to hire now, instead of it being people on phones, people who are, six-figure plus level people. And even at that level, how do you hire the right people, and what are the sort of skills that you look for even beyond the technical? So that's what I'm hoping to bring to the table today. So it's a pleasure being here and a pleasure joining you.
All right. Thanks for being here. I didn't know all of that. Citibank, 100 employees. All right. All
Got,
right.
got layers.
Yeah. Yeah. So this topic came because George and I were talking about interviewing skills, and we spend time on LinkedIn and in groups, and there are always these threads. How do you interview for Excel skill? What's intermediate? Somebody's got they've mastered Excel on their resume. How do you test that? What does it mean? Does it mean anything? So before diving into interviewing, let's back up and talk about what an analyst has to do and different types of analysts. So, George, you want to start then?
Yeah, so it is hard to assess Excel skills. I think a lot of the, it's a platform, right? So I always like to say, learning Excel is like learning the internet, right? Reading the internet. There's no way that you can do that. So we put these proxies in place, like standardized tests, things like that, that might disadvantage the wrong person because if you never used Excel before, maybe you possess these other qualities that you can't really teach. You can teach Excel, you can teach a VLOOKUP, but you can't teach to be curious. You can't
Right.
teach to follow the steps behind data and things like that. So
Yeah,
um,
but can we talk go more towards, so you look inside an analyst's life. That person is there doing the job. What are they doing that makes
Right.
them a good analyst?
That is a good point. Like thinking about, what do analysts really do? Because
Mm-hmm.
I think especially when you're, just starting out in data, you don't really have that understanding. So if
Right.
you get to the point where you understand, data doesn't come wrapped up in a nice bow and box, it's messy, like it's all in the wild, right? Um, so understanding just the messiness of it and what you can do to, bring order to that chaos,
Mm-hmm.
that if you really master a couple tools, I think is way more important than a lot of the Excel under the sun that you might get in these kind of standardized tests. So
Mm-hmm.
once if you understand really what analysts do, then you can start to pinpoint what do I need to learn instead of just kind of the smorgasbord that you get on a lot of these courses and tests and things like that.
Right. Okay. So, Rick, what would you have to say about, you look inside an analyst world? What are they doing?
And well, there's a difference between kind of the mechanics of what they're doing and the part that is just being them and them being who they are, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's the mechanics of it, and a lot of times, and maybe it's changed a bit now. Maybe people are getting interviewed for Excel skills right off the bat, and maybe that's changed a bit from my days when I was hiring a lot more of Excel people. But a lot of times, what I'd run into is there's several layers, even at the six-figure layer of hiring BI consultants. There's a series of interviews that someone goes through, right? There's a series of things that you're looking for each at each layer, often looking for an additional level of complexity, an additional level of mechanical know-how, right?
Mm-hmm.
So often you have to go through an HR person right off the bat. So you have to have your resume to where it is hitting on certain skills, and a lot of times to even make it to an HR person to even see your skills and reel me in, Oz, if I'm getting off topic too much. Okay, but if a lot of times you just have to get past the HR person or even get to them and realize that. So a lot of this is making sure that you have the right things on your resume, et cetera, to be able to highlight the sort of things for the job. And sometimes that means a different cover letter. It means a different resume almost for every type of job.
Mm-hmm.
So I certainly, when I was looking at one point, had several different versions of my resume on whether I was going for a management type job or whether I was going for an analyst type job or I was going for a finance type job. And your background, because all of our backgrounds are so expansive in one way or another, you can craft a lot of those experiences different, especially when you're trying to take 3 bullet points to summarize 5 years of your life.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
a lot of that is just getting to the HR person. Realize the HR person is trying to do 2 or 3 things at times, right? They're trying to separate the wheat from the chaff to some
Mm-hmm.
extent.
Right.
They are often measured on of the people that they send forward to a hiring manager. What is the percentage of those that get hired, right? So a lot of times they want to make sure they're separating the right people. And they're asking you what I would call hygiene questions, and we'll get into that a little bit later, maybe. Hygiene questions, I would say, is, what is what sort of salary do you want? What sort of benefits do you want? What sort of that sort of thing? The things that just kind of keep you status quo. You need to brush your teeth every day. It's just hygiene sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but
Right.
that's just to get you to a potential hiring manager. A hiring manager like me would say, then, okay, well, I'm looking for your eyes lighting up. I'm looking for the passion. I'm looking for the things that can't come with the skills. I'm looking for you to explain to me how you solve a problem in
Okay.
Excel. I'm not looking for VLOOKUP, this, that, the other, the specific skills. I'll have somebody do a technical interview later. I'm looking for, the question might be something to the effect of, okay, tell me about a problem that you ran into, and then without anybody telling you how to fix it or to fix it, tell me how you went about seeing the problem, investigating the problem, and trying to solve the problem. Tell me how you did that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's George answer that question.
So I always like this. So there's an economist from the 19th century called Alfred Marshall, and I use this in a lot of my interviews where he lists the steps on, solving a problem. And it's basically, take the problem, translate it into math, work through the math variables, and when you're done, burn the math. Just make it in plain English, describe the story.
Right, right.
So I'm hearing that with these interviews a lot. That's a good thing to know, that if you're speaking with someone, frame it in things that you're not getting into the weeds of, like, oh, this and that function and things like that.
So no, so
Trying to
what
solve that.
what I'm asking you is as to answer Rick's question as if you were interviewing.
Oh,
You
about
put a
like
question out there.
okay, so about like a story that, like,
Yeah.
of uh
Something you
so
fixed that you weren't asked to fix.
um something that I fixed would be like when I was working with the hospital cleaning staff. They felt like they were way overstaffed. They didn't really have any idea on how to manage their workflow. So, literally meant going, getting blueprints of the hospital, right? Going to, I don't even know what department that was, engineering or something, and finding trade, so I was going there, ended up talking to some kind of trade group about, well, how many minutes do you think it takes to clean a bathroom at a hospital? So, just wild stuff that, like, doesn't really have anything to do with like a sum if or something. And going into that, eventually, getting it into like an optimization kind of model in Solver in Excel. So taking it through, the levels of, like, well, let's start from scratch, really think about the, business behind all these numbers, and then
Mm.
building it back into the model. So, like stories like that, I think, help you identify that you're willing to push the boundaries, and not just, oh, well, we don't have a file for that. Sometimes you got
Mm-hmm.
to get out there and get it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Let
So
me, if I can just jump in on one thing, Oz. So what he did there, and you're very good at this, Oz, as well, is he told a story. And I'm not sure if this is true for everyone. Certainly true for me. That if somebody asks you about a memory that you have, right? If somebody says, "How was your birthday when you turned 40, or you're 30, or 20, or when you graduated high school or college, or whatever, whatever all that is," the memory that you have in your head is a picture, right? It's not words, it's not text, it's not any of that sort of stuff. It's a picture. So to the extent that whenever you're doing an interview, particularly with a hiring manager, not the technical side, so that'll be a technical interview that happened another time, to the extent that you can paint a picture of what you did and how you did it, you are memorable. Now, and so I learned that very young when I was going for my first management interview. And my boss had gotten promoted, I don't know, a year before me, right? And so he was talking through how do you go about doing that? How do you go in with, at the time I had 9 months experience. Who the hell am I? The guy on the phone right next to you taking calls at Citibank, taking collection calls. Who am I? I'm just another dude. And so how do you kind of command a presence, et cetera? So a lot of that was preparation, rote memorization, et cetera. But what he told me was, he said whenever he went for his interview, that all of his experience at the time was selling cars. Right, that's all he had did before he got into this. And he says, so here's what I did. I told a story, and in the story I talked about. I said the question was, how do you motivate people? How do you something? I don't know, whatever it was. And he says, so here's what happened. I had other people who were selling cars, etc. And here's what I would do. I would walk into the office, and he's doing this in a panel interview, right? So where people are looking at him, but he's trying to create the picture, right? I
Mm-hmm.
walk into the office, and you got Joe over there, you got Sally over there, and everybody's looking at you. And here's what I told him. I said, hey, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And I took my $5, and I remember, and I pinned it. And he did this very visually on purpose. And I pinned the $5 up on the wall. And I said, and if anybody can beat me over the next 30 minutes, lunch is on me, and that $5 is on me, or something of that nature. So fast forward, he got feedback on his interview later. And I'm sorry, he knew somebody who was in the panel in HR that was, as the conversations were going on around him getting this promotion or not, or him getting the job. And as the conversations were going around, people didn't remember the text, right? People didn't remember the name Oz. They didn't remember Josie who came in here, that sort of thing. What they remembered was, oh, remember that guy with the $5? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that.
That's true. Yeah.
And so you heard that a lot whenever George was talking as well, to the extent with a hiring manager that you could paint a picture of how you did these sorts of things and how you did something that was a little bit different, that wasn't expected, asked
Mhm.
for. It didn't require somebody, a leader, to be on your ass to make it happen. You just did
Mhm.
it on your own. That's the sort of thing that those people are looking for. And they'll ask a little bit about Excel, but usually they'll pass the technical skills on to another technical person to ascertain that. So you're going through several layers here, right? And that's even before you get to the Excel skills and the technical side of it.
Mhm. So, okay, so when I think about when I first got my first true analyst job, it was as a commissions analyst. And I remember the final person who was going to hire me, and I said, I've got very limited Excel skill. And she said that calculating the commission is mostly going to be pivot tables, and she going to show me that. So there was almost no technical that they asked me. It was more about, yeah, getting up off my ass, a supervisor not having to be on my ass, and keeping confidential because this was people's compensation. And yeah, that was interesting. And so when I find out now there are all these threads about how do you interview for Excel skill, it's a bit bizarre to me, given my experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think maybe there's a little bit of a difference between, kind of what I am or what I
Hmm.
was at the time, which is really more of a data slinger, as
Okay.
Phil Jellin says it,
Yeah.
a data slinger, uh, versus probably somebody like a Jordan Goldmeyer who's really more of a ninja, or a
Okay.
Charles Fast Williams. They have a certain skill and they're very precise in how they do this. I'm the guy who walks into the bar with a machete or a sledgehammer. I just start
Yeah.
slinging data, right? Just
Yeah.
and which is good because the ninjas don't expect you to throw a tire at them, and
Uh-huh.
they all do that. So I think there's, particularly as you're getting up to the ninja level and you're looking at somebody, to really kind of at the MVP level sort of thing, and you're really looking for somebody who's got that sort of skills to know precisely how you speed up Excel.
Okay. Right.
Precisely, and that you're going to be coding in VBA, and you need to be able to take on this advanced stuff to begin with.
Yeah.
But if the question is then, are you a data slinger or not? Regardless of VBA or some of the advanced things, or can you sling data? Can you see a problem and go grab a tire and throw it off the fire? And can you just kind of make stuff happen? I think that takes maybe not a different mindset, but it takes a different skill. It's a little less technical on the Excel, and it's really more somebody just kind of gets in, rolls up their sleeves, and says, "Hell, I don't know how to do what I'm about to do, but we're gonna figure it out."
Right. Right. And so how does that tie? Because I wanted to ask you a question about why is that story important to you? Why aren't you just asking questions about do you show up on time? Do people like you? Do they find you friendly? And then, okay, let's go see how you are technical. Why do you want that story and eyes lighten up?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well, I'll
No.
jump in real quick because I've already said something, and then George. Um, as for me, somebody who's been in their career long enough, who's been around long enough, I'm looking for people who are going to make me look good. I'm looking for, there's old saying, A players hire A players, B players hire B and C players, and once you got too many C's, you're in trouble. So the best thing you can do is not hire any B's.
Mm-hmm.
Hire A's as much as you can, and particularly with some of the skills. Now, if this skill is, if I'm hiring a consultant and they're client-facing day one project manager of a large ERP system rollout, yeah, you got to be everything, right? But for the most part, if you're bringing in analysts, particularly people right out of college, people who are starting their careers and trying to figure out the best ways to interview for the first time, et cetera. Um, I'm looking for someone who has. I'm going to teach everybody pretty much the same thing, anyways. Everybody that I hire is pretty much going to go to the same training class.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming a base level of skill, And so I'm looking for this old saying, the cream always rises to the top. No matter where you are, no matter what you do, the cream always rises to the top. I'm looking for the person who just figures out how to get stuff done. I'm
Mm,
looking for somebody who's curious. I'm looking for somebody who lights up. I'm not looking for somebody who's just kind of taking this job because they can't wait to get on to what their real love is, which is project management or something
okay.
else. I'm looking for somebody who's just really kind of a nerd for this stuff. And there's a thing about entrepreneurs, and I heard this recently, and I shared it with a friend and said, somebody asked me why, I do Excel TV. Why did I edit 200 videos by myself before I got a virtual assistant? Why did I go probably a lot of money in debt making all this happen? And before that, I had a sports memorabilia website. Why did I do all of that and the money I went in debt on that? And the answer to that is I don't know how to not do it. I don't know how to not want to
Mm,
do it.
mm,
And so I'm looking for people who, when I'm hiring them, who don't know how to not want to do it.
yeah.
It's innate. It's part of them.
That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
And that has me think about, where this skill for me started. It was like, God damn it, this shit has got to stop. Why do these people keep calling with the same damn questions?
Yeah.
You know,
That.
when, yeah, when is this going to stop? And then I start digging into data, and then they tell me, okay, you got to go tell Charles so he can merge all these records and get all this stuff to stop rolling around. And well, Charles says next week, and then it's got to update overnight once he puts the stuff in. You know
There,
what? That's
there's a
enough time for them to call me two or three more times.
there's a story of I'll tell a few stories probably
Yeah,
throughout, but
yeah.
paint some pictures. I've set a precedence here. There's a story of a coach down here in Florida where I live. He was the coach of Florida Gators. He went on to become coach of Illinois, but he was popular for a bit, and then he wasn't popular for a bit. His name was Ron Zook, and he's coach of Illinois now, I believe. And anyways, he got fired. The team wasn't doing well, and the fans weren't big fans of his to begin with because he didn't like bleed orange and blue. That's important in Gatorland. And so they fired him. They fired him with maybe a game or two left to go, right? And this is all folklore, so who always knows what's true and what isn't? Leave your comments below. But the story is his wife asked him because he's one of those most of those coaches 5 in the morning till midnight sort of thing, always on the field, always recruiting. Now he's recruiting like crazy, and he's been fired. And his wife asked him, said, "Why are you doing this? You're not even going to be here next year. You need to go out for a job. You need to, why are you doing like this?" And his answer, which I thought was perfect, he says, "This is the only way I know how to do it."
Hmm.
And so you're looking for people who are like that regardless, this is just the way they are. And
Yeah.
if you can find somebody who being passionate about their
Uh-huh.
job, being passionate about looking for things that don't look right, and it's just natural to them, or that they play at something that other people would have to work at, well, then that's phenomenal. You hire that person, and you give them as much money as your budget will allow.
Yeah. And that's what I was trying to get at earlier, this question about when you look at what an analyst does day to day, what is that and what makes a good one stand out? And, I think about, the positions that I had. There's somebody next to me, you know, this is the data that was sent to me. Well, yeah, but it's a mess.
Yes. That was so the closest thing I've had to with being in supervision of people. So I've had a lot of interns working for me over the summer, over the
Hmm.
years, and that's always my biggest frustration. It's not that they don't know how to write a VLOOKUP because I
Yeah.
can now I have my course that I can just sit them in front of and watch. But anyway, it's that when they are working through a problem and they just stop, you know,
Hmm.
where did that come from? It's like retrace your steps. It's like anything. If you lost something, keep following things back. How does this work? Just sit there and look
Yeah.
at it. And so that I do think it is something that when I'm looking at what makes a good analyst, it's somebody that's kind of looking at the problem, from start to end.
Hmm.
Where did this data come from? Where's it going? Kind of thinking in that linear fashion about things, because when you just sit there and it's like, well, I don't know where that came from, and if it's messy, well, I don't know, why. Let's keep going. So
Right.
yeah, that
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good one.
And there's so many other things that made it exciting and made it like this Wild West kind of. God damn it! I got my gun and I got this old tired horse and this saddle I found somewhere, and we're gonna do this because there's so much other stuff. There is the data is messed up. I know what's going on with it, but I've got to get this to payroll soon. Now, where is it clean enough to send to payroll knowing that I've got some stuff to resolve? You know, there's a spectrum there.
Yeah.
And accepting that the data is never 100% clean and getting a call from somebody asking me about, I'm tallying up $4 million and there's $1.19 that I can't account for. Well, how long do you chase down $1.19 in that magnitude?
There's an old saying that says, and I know you just use payroll as an example, but I work for an HR outsourcing company, and I have a saying there that nobody ever calls you up to tell you that you got their paycheck right.
Yeah. Oh God.
And
Yeah.
it's wrong. So the payroll as your example was maybe a bad one because $1.90 is bad.
Well, no,
Yeah. But yeah, I get what you're saying. There comes a point where you just know from management, you just know from being around long enough that this is acceptable enough.
right, yeah, because we would do the whole previous year's worth of calculations with every paycheck. Yeah, so everything would get resolved because there would be all kinds of things in there. Um, a salesperson is finally letting me know about a sale from the previous month that had to go outside of the process because it was part of a newly bought company. So there's all kinds of stuff moving around, and there's just an understanding that the data is never 100% clean. Yeah, that's tough. That can be something tough for a good analyst to get. Um,
I think, from my perspective, that's what I'm looking for, though, right? I'm
mhm.
looking for the person who won't just accept that the report looks the way it looks whenever they exported it from SAP.
Right,
That's
And,
right.
true.
and,
Yeah.
they're going to be curious about those sorts of things, which is why you ask the sorts of questions that you do. At least the hiring manager does. Of explain to me how you saw something that didn't look right, and you went out of your way without me having to tell you to go do it.
Yeah,
Explain
Yeah.
it to me and walk me through it and show me that. So there's kind of a method to the madness as to why those things are being asked, so you don't get into an uncomfortable position of having to paperwork somebody out the door.
right.
Right?
And
Yeah.
and you remind me of a thing I learned as an analyst was if I show up at Rick's doorstep and he's not expecting me, it's old shit time. Because I have found something that is not going to make Rick happy or the department happy. Something's wrong with the data, and time and time again, I had to play that role of like I'm the Grim Reaper. Showed up with more bad news. Because right, I'm not going to show up and say, "Hey, everything ties out." No,
Woohoo!
no.
Yellow time.
Show up and
Wow.
say something about, well, the I just found out that this report is obsolete and I got to redo 4 months worth of commissions because this report is bad. And I'm going to tell them not to send me this report again.
Wow. Yeah. I was rereading one of my old posts where I said, reinvent the wheel, make it round, right? Because that does happen. So many of these
Mm-hmm.
reports, well, why don't we add on this? Or, we got to do it this way now. And,
Mm-hmm.
you get these monsters, and I think that is true about the good analysts. Well, why are we doing it this way? Not afraid to reinvent the wheel. I think that sometimes that looks like, oh, all this extra work, why are you doing it? It's
Mhm.
good as is, but having that drive to always improve, I think, is important, because I see a lot of people who work with Excel, and I don't know, there's really no drive to like improve.
Mhm.
I mean, that's why I started blogging, is like, well, let me get these problems out there and talk with other people. And I actually think that's another thing about being a good analyst is, bringing it outside of the office, not just leaving things, oh, that's at work, whatever, going to the forums, going, online, put up a video of what you learned that day. I think with all these opportunities now, that is another element to, showcasing yourself as a good analyst, is, not feeling like, oh, I'll just leave it at work and pick it up the next day and whatever. It's not very good,
Mhm.
but it's work. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. All right. So what I'm getting, because I don't know if I've mentioned my friend during, I don't know if I've mentioned my friend during the broadcast, but the one who hired somebody who has the Excel skill, but she's spending her weekends cleaning up stuff that he should have caught. I'm wondering if maybe she can start asking and looking for eyes to light up, ask for problems that he solved without having to be prompted.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I like that approach. What are some other ways of digging out who's gonna be good for? Because and you mentioned that thing about who's gonna make you look good. Because she got to a place to where she had been embarrassed enough in front of her boss because of stuff she just trusted him with. So now he does a lot of work and then she redoes it before sending it to her boss while they prepare to get him out of there.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I separate instances like that. And this is something that I learned when I was in the call center, right? Whenever I used to work in the call center, I know you and Oz, you and I have talked about this before.
Yeah.
This is our mutual experience with that sort of stuff. Is there's a difference between motivation and skill, right? And there are ways, at least in the call center, and this applies in Excel as well. It's just in just about any industry. But the way you would do this in the call center, imagine you're taking phone calls and you're answering telephone calls for, I don't know, a cable company, right? You're sitting there, you're manning the 1-800 lines, and things are taking too long, or you're not getting the right satisfaction, from the people who are listening to you. And there's two ways that employees figure out whether or not you have a skill problem or whether you have a motivation problem, right? First thing that they'll do is they'll log in right next to you. They'll come up and they'll cuddle up right next to you. They'll plug in their phone right next to yours and they'll listen to the phone call. Now, this isn't just to listen to your phone call, right? This is to document what you can do at your best, right?
Oh.
Right. This is to document what you can do at your best. Whenever nobody, you don't think
Oh.
anybody's, you know somebody's listening, everyone else. So this is to see what your skill is, right?
Okay.
And then what will often happen is a week or 2 weeks later, they'll monitor you remotely and see what the difference is between, whenever they were plugged in right next to you, and to see, okay, we determined it wasn't a skill issue, it's a motivation issue. Now, if it's a skill
Hmm.
issue, if it was a skill issue, that's different. I can try to upskill you. I can send you to training. I can do coaching. There's a number of things that I can do there if it's a skill issue. If it's a motivation issue, we start to document that. At that point, at that point, that's when you need to start paperworking someone out the door. Unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I think that applies also to Excel. And I'm not sure how it. You're not plugging in right next to someone, but if someone is creating something for you and you ask them to bring it in, and you ask them what a VLOOKUP is, and they know how to do it, and you say, well, do you know how to cleanse this report that comes out of SAP? Do you know how to cleanse that to get it to a format that's better? Do you know how to do these things technically? And to the extent they know how to do that, and they're just choosing not to, well, then we got a bigger problem. And
Okay.
I need to start removing my risk, right? I need to start having you do less and less and marginalize you to some extent and then start paperworking you out the door.
Uh,
Hmm.
and what are some other ways you can keep that person from getting in the door?
So like I just released a course on Excel for healthcare, and the more that I look into these like kind of industry specific challenges,
Hmm.
one thing that I find useful is, if you're asking somebody in an interview, like what are our problems here, right? It's like selling anything, what's your customer's pain point? As an analyst, what is your boss's pain point? Because from there, you can go about thinking, well, what specifically in Excel is going to help me with that? Like in my course, I'm talking about, like staffing is just really at hospitals. It's 24/7. It's always flexing. Every department's doing it a little differently. So, are there templates that you can set up? Are there tools in Excel that you can use to kind of make this workflow a little bit more manageable? So, if you can kind of think about pain point, solution, how is Excel the bridge for that? So that's kind of one thing that I'm trying to tease out more in different industries. Another thing that could to not be a gotcha, but also to check for that kind of fire in the belly is like, you know, where are you going to learn about Excel, right? What are your favorite channels
Mm.
online? Hopefully Excel TV, right? Now, but
Hmm.
because that's showing at least that like you care,
Okay.
because that's showing that if you got a problem, oh, I go to this or that site, that you're not just, oh, it's Excel, because unfortunately it's just something that people use and they just kind of abuse, right? They never really take the time to learn it. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. How can
Interesting.
you start interviewing in ways that aren't gotcha, but also show that this person cares and wants to learn more? Because some people, maybe they don't know all the Excel right now, but if they kind of understand what's in store for them, then they'll be fine. They have the resources. So yeah.
So it's difficult to not get sucked in by charisma, right? And so whenever you're trying to make sure that you're bringing in the right people, what I almost always say is whenever I'm coaching people who work for me as they're hiring people, say, and they say, well, I think this person might be good, but I'm not sure, and they're kind of wavering on the fence, and I say, then we're not hiring them. Um, unless we just need so many people, we just can't keep up. Whenever the right person walks in the door, you know it, and you know it within 5 to 10 seconds.
Huh.
A lot of
Wow.
what you know at that point is charisma. It's the way they carry themselves. It's the way they look at you dead in the eye. It's the way that there's certain kind of I don't know, it's just a certain way that you carry yourself. There's a confidence that you kind of not command a room, but you're there, and
Hmm.
uh, and most people don't have that. Now, there's a double-edged sword to that. Is it just charisma? Is it just fake confidence, et cetera? But that does get you a long way. It gets you a long way in the employment world. It gets you a long way in the dating world.
Okay.
A long way in a lot of different places. So I'll say first off, you know it when you see it, and so that's usually where I start. Now, usually I know in the first 10 to 15 seconds. The rest of it is just banter and talking, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
Um, I'll hit on one other point though and I know that George, you had talked about this in one of your training classes about a discussion we had here at Excel TV where I said you don't hear a good analyst, you see it. And here's a little backstory to that. The backstory is that you is not just an analyst. That came from whenever I was on the phones. And I had my first management job, and I had 20 people or so, and they were on the phones, and they were doing collections. And I used to tell my team, I'm 25 years old, or so, 20, I think I was 25 up in Utah, and I told my team that I could stand up and look out over all the cubicles, right? I could look out all over the cubicles, and I could tell who was a good collector. Because usually
Wow.
standing up, and usually they had their headphones on, and you could kind of see the conversation. Now, of people standing up, there were two kinds. There were the people who were showing off. You're gonna do what? There were those people who were going all Walmart on you. So there were those. But then there were the people you could just tell because the way they were talking with their body, et cetera, et cetera. So and so that really hit me at 25 years old, and I told my
Hmm.
team, I can see a good collector. And at that point,
Wow.
you're collecting on people's credit cards or whatever else, and then I could see it then when people were good or not, looking over a sea of cubicles. I could tell who the good people were just by being able to look at their body language, etc. And I
Wow.
think that holds true a lot as I started getting into more hiring analysts and hiring other people. You could see that as well. There are people that would have probably done very good in the job I was trying to hire them for, but I didn't hire them because their eyes lit up. Not whenever I asked them about Excel or analytics, their eyes lit up when I asked them about project management. And
Mm.
the body language was so different that I couldn't, in good conscience, hire them for the job that I was hiring them for because I knew their passion was somewhere else.
Okay.
Wow.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. Cool. Cool. Wow. This is good. So I don't have anything left. Um wow. Should I summarize?
Sure.
Anything else you'd like to get out of this, George?
Huh?
Anything else you'd like to hit on, George?
Yeah, yeah.
No, I think that this was a good overview, especially having Rick here, coming from that kind of
Yeah.
interviewer side. Um, and yeah, I just, I see it so much, people, come out of school, oh, I need to learn Excel, what do I do next? I got this interview, so I really think that this is helpful information for a lot of people. So glad that we can have an experienced hiring manager on board, and then
Yeah.
Oz, because Oz has some good old posts about, interviewing for Excel and things like that. So glad that we can dig those up and have a conversation.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks.
I'll
Rick,
leave you, I'll leave you one more thought then.
all right.
A little parting thought. I told you I was going to talk about football stories. I'll tell you the other one. The other one, and then, again, who knows what's folklore and what isn't? But there's a Jacksonville Jaguars where I live out here in Northeast Florida. Jacksonville Jaguars, and we had a coach coaches ago, Jack Del Rio. Um, Now, he had only been like a defensive coordinator for a few years. He was a former player, but really hadn't been a head coach anywhere, and really didn't have that sort of experience. And had only been coaching, guys for a few years, it seemed like. And the story about how he got the job is he walked into the owner's office, Wayne Weaver, who was interviewing a few people at the time, and he walked in with a 3.5-inch binder filled with, here's what's wrong with your program and here's how I'm going to fix it. Which is probably completely different than I'm going to run a 4-3 defense versus this, that, and the other, and yeah, I'm the right person for the job, and I can bring on this player and that coach and blah, blah, blah. It's completely different to a prepared to a level to where you're walking in, that you give someone the confidence that you're passionate about what you do, that you know what the right blog posts are, that you're going to go and get your answers, whether that's Chandu or Cell TV or George J. Mount, that you've prepared enough and you've done your homework. It shows. Whenever I was first getting promoted out of being a collector, I got promoted after 9 months on the job. I prepared for that interview because nobody had ever been promoted that quickly just from being a collector, right? I was 24 years old. And I prepared for that interview to the point that I had note cards like I was studying for an exam. And I had on one side of the note card, I had the question. On the other side, I had, here's going to be my answer. Here's how I was going to tell a story, etc. And not only would I go through it, but I'd have my girlfriend at the time hold up cards and do mock interviews with me and all of that. So I'm saying, take it seriously. It's not just Jack Del Rio. It's everybody. If this is something that you really want and you want the career opportunity, act like you give a damn.
Yeah.
I mean, really go and capture your career. Don't wait for it to come to you. Don't just sit behind a computer and send out resumes, etc. If you want it, go get it.
Yeah. That's powerful. You got to go get it. And I tell you, it's getting up off your ass in so many ways. So
Yeah.
many ways.
I like the old saying. Gosh, it might have been another football movie or something like that, but it might have been like North Dallas 40 or something. I don't know, one of those prison football movies or something. But one of the guys comes in, he huddles everybody together, and he says, the women and children have been put to sleep. Now let's go get some food. It's like that. Go stake your claim and go get what's yours.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
And that was kind of my attitude around data. It man, it could be nerve wracking at times, but the stakes were too high, and I took it way, I took it seriously. Whether it was people's money or their certificate for completing a curriculum, whatever it was, or just somebody who just they needed to be having lunch, not spending their lunch calling me dealing with something because of some crap in the data. No. So I took it very, very seriously and hunted down a lot of things. All right, cool. Well, this is a good conversation. Well, I appreciate it, George, for bringing this up, and
Thanks,
hopefully,
Oz.
hopefully we can make things better for some folks. Whether it's hiring managers or wannabe analysts or people who are interviewing. Appreciate your input, Rick, a lot for having, the person on the other side of the desk.
Yeah.
Pleasure being here, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, that is it for this episode of Excel in the Wild. All right, we'll see you again.
Thank you.
So I stopped broadcasting.